sua attività di ricerca, oltre che a proposito della problematica del platonismo di Cambridge, anche a proposito della problematica che oggi è molto importante, lo dico subito, sulla filosofia e le donne, la filosofia delle donne, le donne filosofe. È stata professoressa all'Università di Aberystwyth in Galles, difficile da pronunciare, spero di non aver sbagliato troppo, e attualmente è honorary visiting professor all'Università di York. È stata professoressa invitata in tantissime importanti università al mondo, fra cui Barnard College, la Columbia University a New York, e è autrice di importanti pubblicazioni nell'ambito scientifico che ho menzionato sopra. Ricordo due recenti pubblicazioni che sono due monografie, una su British Philosophy in 17th Century per Oxford University Press, e poi anche un libro su Anne Conway uscito nel 2004, se non sbaglio, nel 2004. Ha anche diverse raccolte di saggi, fra cui Platonism and the Origins of Modernity, Studies on Locke, Newton and Newtonianism, ma anche, qui non lo vedo, Every Mortal Centenary Studies, sì. Che è il libro, quando ero un giovane studente, attraverso il quale ho conosciuto scientificamente Sara Hutton, che ho conosciuto attraverso i libri e poi ho avuto il piacere di conoscere personalmente. Moltissimi articoli su Cudworth, su Henry Moore e sul platonismo di Cambridge in generale, e anche due edizioni importanti. Una prima edizione delle Conway Letters, che era stata fatta all'inizio del secolo da una studiosa che si chiamava Nicholson, un'edizione incompleta e che Sara Hutton ha completato e stabilito rigorosamente. Anne Conway è una delle più importanti filosofe del Seicento, è stata anche una corrispondente di Henry Moore. Sara Hutton ha contribuito in modo potentissimo alla conoscenza all'interno della comunità scientifica delle figure di Anne Conway, e anche l'edizione di un'opera di Cudworth. È anche la direttrice di una famosa serie di International Sheets of the History of Ideas, e ha molti altri incarichi scientifici. Io le lascio subito la parola dicendovi che oggi ci parlerà di due manoscritti importantissimi, alcuni manoscritti, non sono due, recentemente scoperti, e ci darà poi maggiori dettagli, concernenti la famosa corrispondenza fra Henry Moore e Descartes, una corrispondenza che Cartesio inizia nel dicembre del 1648, un anno e mezzo prima di morire, con questo giovane, all'epoca, filosofo inglese, Henry Moore. E sono stati scoperti questi manoscritti presso l'Università di Cambridge. Quindi quello che la professoressa Sara Hutton ci dirà oggi è qualcosa di molto importante, e qui all'Università del Salento verranno dette per la prima volta delle cose che ancora non sono state dette in maniera esplicita all'interno della comunità scientifica. Si tratta quindi di un'occasione imperdibile, e io smetto qui il mio discorso e le lascio immediatamente la parola. Grazie Sara.
Grazie Igor, grazie per l'invito. Mi fa molto piacere tornare in Italia, visitare Lecce per la prima volta della vita, è stupendo. Mi dispiace il fatto che faccio la mia presentazione in inglese, ma se è necessario spiegare qualche cosa in italiano possiamo, o io o il professor Agostini, vediamo. Parlerò, come ha detto, su un manoscritto di Henry Moore, delle lettere fra Moore e Descartes, che si trova nella biblioteca dell'Università di Cambridge. Fu scoperto da Andrew Janiak, ma Janiak non ha detto, si interessa su Newton e non su Moore, e ha fatto un piccolo footnote che ho messo in un libro su Newton, ma non c'erano differenze. Sono stato in contatto con Janiak per dire dove è questo manoscritto. Non mi ha potuto dare una referenza precisa, quindi ho dovuto cercare nell'università. Questo manoscritto si trova fra i papers di Newton, che è interessante come è arrivato lì, non sappiamo, ma finalmente l'ho trovato e presento oggi. Voi siete la prima udienza per i miei pensi su questo manoscritto. Devo dire che ho permissione di usare le immagini per ricerca personale, allora non bisogna pubblicarle, vi chiedo. Anche devo chiedere voi se voi vuole fare o proseguire ricerca su questo, per favore chieda a me prima. Ci sono gente all'Università di Cambridge a chi ho detto ecco lo che ho trovato e loro non hanno rispetto questo protocollo. Voi avete davanti voi un handout con un timeline delle corrispondenze e qualche piccola trascrizione su quale parlerò. Allora, inglese. So, as you know, Henry Moore is a very important figure in the English reception of Descartes. He is famous for his having corresponded with Descartes, a correspondence which was only prevented from going further because of Descartes' death. And there were, as you see from this slide, it's a correspondence conducted in the years 1648 and 1649. The first letter, December 1648, from Moore to Descartes. Moore wrote 4 letters. Descartes replied to 2 of them. The 4th letter. Descartes received all those letters, but his death, of course, prevented him replying. This is the direct contact with Moore, but there is more material in this correspondence. There is a posthumous side to this correspondence, and that is to say, in 1654, when Clercellier was preparing his edition of Descartes' correspondence and collecting together the letters to put in it, he contacted Henry Moore. And he told Moore that he asked for permission to publish Moore's letters. First, he asked for any copies, the original copies of Descartes' letters, which Moore had. And he told Moore that there were more writings of Descartes and that he had a fragment or a part of a letter which Descartes had begun to write to Moore but had never completed before he went to Sweden. Well, Moore didn't reply to this for quite a long time, as you can see from the handout. You don't have a handout, sorry. But he did. But this is because he was not in Cambridge when the letter arrived. But when he was very excited when he found this, and he replied to Clercellier, and Clercellier sent him this Responsio ad Fragmentum Cartesiae, to which Moore indeed, he sent him this fragment found among Descartes' letters, to which Moore replied, wrote a reply eventually. Now, the other important thing about Moore's letter to Clercellier, first of all, he said, well, I don't think you should publish the 4th letter. Why? Because Descartes did not have a chance to reply. So he's being a proper member of the Republic of Letters. It's not good to publish a letter where your opponent or the person you're writing to doesn't have the right of reply. Instead, he suggested that Cléselier find somebody else to reply, and then he could publish it. But he left this up to Cléselier, if he would publish this or not. The other thing, which is very important here, is that he said to Cléselier, I don't want you to publish the letters which you have because I need to make corrections. I will make corrections and send these letters to you. So, in fact, the letters which are published are not exactly the originals that Descartes received, and we don't have the manuscripts, so we don't know how much has changed. But we think it's only a small amount. So, this is the total amount of exchange between Descartes and More, including the things that happened posthumously. When More published his own collection of philosophical writings in 1662, which is the end of your timeline, he included all of this material there, including his letter to the correspondence with Cléselier, and his reply to the fragmentary reply of Descartes. He also added to this another letter, Epistola ad Vece, or Voce in Italiano, which is not a letter to Descartes, but it's a long apology for Descartes, Cartesian physics, and Igor has published on this. It's actually a very important evidence that More was very, very deeply involved with Descartes, in spite of the fact that we know he became rather more doubtful about some of the religious implications of Descartes later. So these are letters which appear in various forms, and they printed formats. The only manuscripts we have are copies made by Samuel Hartlib, who was the go-between between More and Descartes, got them to correspond in the first place, and he made copies of these letters. For some reason, More sent to him his original copies that Descartes had sent him too. So there are no autograph manuscripts of these letters, except for Descartes. Well, even those haven't survived. But in Sheffield University Library, there are copies which have been digitized. You can see them online of More's letters and some of Descartes' two replies. Now, so the discovery of a manuscript copy in the Cambridge University Library is potentially very exciting. This is it. This is a little book, so big, a notebook by a student. Potentially, this could tell us a lot about the original. If we can date this accurately and other things, we could tell us a lot about the provenance, the history of this manuscript, the manuscript circulation of Descartes' letters. It was miscatalogued, as I told you. It took a lot of work to find it, but I did find it. And I have, Andrew Dreniak, I emphasize, is very happy he wants people to work on it, very happy for me to work on it and tell you about it. So this, as you can see, is potentially very interesting because it tells us a lot of things. Just this first page, it tells us that the name of the author, the name of the student to whom this belonged, Thomas Clark. It tells us his college, Sydney, Sussex. Cambridge, as you probably know, is a collegiate university. When you go to study even today, you go to a particular college which is part of the overall university. In those days, you were taught within that college. There were also lectures, as today, outside the college, but this student was a student at Sydney, Sussex, and he dates his notebook 1654. These are very important clues. But so a lot of questions to ask. What is the relationship between these letters and the Hartlib letters, and the editions that we have? Who was the author? From what copy were they made? And there are other mysteries. I've mentioned, why are they in Newton's papers? How do they come to be there? It could be completely by accident. Another mystery is there are only 3 of More's letters in this, not all 4 that are published in the collection of philosophical writings. But the date also is particularly intriguing because this is exactly the time when Clercellier makes contact with More, which suggests that these letters may have been produced around this copy may have been produced around that time. Well, I'll tell you a little, introduce you a little bit more to what's in it. This shows, it's got on the left-hand side, it's got the contents, beautifully handwritten out there, and opposite page, the first letter of More to Descartes. And it contains Descartes' second response to More. And that's the first reply by Descartes, and it carries on, as I said, to there's More's reply to Descartes and More's second reply to Descartes, but there's only 3 more letters. There's 2 of Descartes and 3 of More. The notebook is then blank for several pages, quite a lot of pages. They've all been scored obviously for making notes in. But if you turn the book around and start the other way, there is other material which confirms this is a student notebook, because there are things like just trying out his handwriting, other people's names. There's a poem, an answer to his lady asking why lilies were so bright and red, which is obviously a lot.
Which letter of More is not there?
The 4th one.
The last one.
The one which he said, maybe you shouldn't publish this because maybe it's not fair to Descartes.
Yes.
I comment on him and he can't reply to me. That one.
E non c'è la 4ª lettera di More che, come ha spiegato prima la professoressa, si era pensato di non pubblicare rispettando le regole per cui le lettere non unanswered, senza risposta, talvolta non venivano pubblicate. Pardon, grazie.
Okay, so at the other side, at the other end of the book, there are notes, quotations from the church fathers, things like that. Not very much, but it's enough to show you that this is indeed a notebook. Here you can compare, just to make the point that it doesn't look as if it's been made as a copy to be used, except by the author, because these are the openings of the letters, the letters in the Hartlib correspondence. These are the copies made there, and you can see that the handwriting is very clear. It's very clearly done. It's obviously been made so that they can be read and maybe copied and followed. But if you look at the handwriting of the Clark book, it's obviously written very, very fast. Now, to go into some of the detail about the state of the text, these are obviously copies. They're not originals. That's the first thing. And as I said, it looks as if they couldn't be made before 1654, because that is the date on the notebook very clearly. This doesn't mean they were made in 1654, of course, but there's a strong possibility. And as I say, it's not what we call a fair copy, and it's obviously being corrected. You can see corrections here. And something and there are lots of other details. Perhaps I'll come back to that one. Let's just move on a bit. Oh, this is the Hartlib again. Now, it just sort of some general points about the way these notes have been made. You can see them illustrated here. And I'll actually go back to that one. There are many contractions, the and for the letter M. But unlike Hartlib, he expands the que at the end. Instead of just the Q, it's the full que at the end. There are a clarissime, via clarissime is always contracted to VC, always. And in parenthesis, così. There are many of the proper nouns. Have I got an example here? No. Many of, for instance, the titles of Descartes' works are with a lowercase, or things like that. And another feature, I'll go back to this one, which may, I think, be significant. This is the foot of a page, the bottom of the page. Ac pygmeos and pygmies, this is where he has this is a letter, he is so flattering of Descartes. He says, all other philosophy is like pygmies compared with small dwarf people, you are the great giant philosophy. And at the end, and that's the ac pygmeos, there is then a space to the end of the line, and then you begin, there's plenty of room there's nothing omitted there.
Yeah. But there is space.
There is space, which maybe suggests he's following a copy, one possibility, and has just kept the pagination, possibly. Other features. There are occasional words underlined. I think that's congruas, that corrected word up in the 1, 2, 3, 4th line in the middle. It's got an underlining. And you can see there are differences in the ink where corrections have been made or words have been inserted. I'll come back to some of these in more detail in a minute. Clarke does not put in accents. Hartlib papers do. Generally doesn't have the paragraphs. There are some margin references. Most of them have the date, but some of them don't. And there are changes in the order of words. For example, extensionem infinitam is the other way around in Clarke, infinitam extensionem. Words, points like this. So, going to the transcriptions, which one is this one? You have, I think you have on your handout number. Yes, the second one is this here, where you can see the you could see some of these features in the transcription, and that this extensionem infinitum, which differs from the Clercellier version, which there is a margin reference for this passage to Principia Article 21, and there are insertions there. Nimium has been inserted. Sorry, I'm pointing halfway down. You can see it there, and so on. There are also deletions. It doesn't come up in the transcription, but down at the bottom here there is a deletion.
which is the edition?
Of the edition, the Cléselier?
No, the edition. These words are added, or not?
These words are there, added, yes.
Added.
Yes.
Even Modestis, are you sure?
Well, it's a darker ink.
Okay.
And it's added in the sense that it looks as if there was a space, because maybe he couldn't read what was there.
Okay.
And then it's in that sense. It's not an addition that he has himself put there. An insertion, I guess. It's been returned to where it should be, because perhaps he couldn't read that bit and asked somebody what it would look. That's what it looks like. But even then, he missed a word, nimium, so he then had to put it with an insertion mark.
Yes.
So there are these features. Another thing that Alan Gaby noticed when he did the Adam Tannery notes for the Nouvelle Présentation, he did a comparison of the Hartlib and more and the Hartlib papers and Moore's version of those papers when he printed them, and he noticed another thing in this. Have I got the example? No, I haven't got it here. Sorry. But on well, there's another thing I'll come back to here. That what he noticed was that there were some changes, what one might call register, small things which where Moore might have said me hekele, in the first version becomes sane in the printed version, as if he's making it a bit less enthusiastic, a bit more polite. They're small adjustments, and you find these in the Clark manuscript, a lot of them. That's another feature. Come back. Now, another thing which I've noticed is that this is Clark on the left, Hartlib on the right, and you notice here on the Clark a word underlined. The ink is actually darker, it's Kerax, it's wax. But here in the Hartlib, there is a blank for that exact point. The Hartlib scribe couldn't read it and didn't, so left a space, which was fairly standard practice. But Clark has written it in, but it's been underlined. So this may be significant, it may be not. But this is the kind of detail you have to look for. There are other things. Whoops. Got this one. That's young. Da corrente. Sì. Bene.
Grazie.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. Some other details. There are readings which the Hartlib scribes. There are two scribes for the Hartlib, two copies for the first Moore's first letter, and some of these some of the words are wrong, and the Clark manuscript gets them right. one I just mentioned is the clerk has the word a sulcit instead of a fulcit, which the clerk gets right. So, other things to mention. So, and there are quite a number of changes of word order compared with the with the Hartlib. Now, these changes of word order really are, again, this is something Alan Gaby noticed, one could explain these simply as putting it in better Latin style. It's not actually changing the words, but the word order. It's the kind of copying mistake, which isn't a mistake in the sense it's kind of it's not in the category of a misreading. It's like a well, it may have been done unconsciously. I don't know. I mean, one would need to know more about, need to consult an expert on that. But there are clearly elements here of possibly the clerk, the scribes were doing this unconsciously, standardizing the Latin. But there are sufficient key differences. There's a sufficient number of these differences to suggest that the Clark manuscript was not based on the Hartlib papers, because there are quite a lot of these changes. And it's particularly this change of register so far that I've noticed. So this all suggests that they're not based on directly on the Clark, but on the Hartlib. On the other hand, this underlining is very intriguing. Anyway, let's move on from there, and I now begin some hypothesis bingo. I come up with a few ideas about what this manuscript might be, and I think there are two possibilities. It's either a student notebook of the kind of a type which was in circulation in Cambridge, or just as today students make photocopies or use their phones to take pictures of texts, you had to write it out in those days. So it may be there were manuscripts in circulation, and this was copied by Thomas Clark. But the other question is, why 1654? Why this key date? Now, the first hypothesis is that, and in that relation, one hypothesis might be that Clark made his copy from. We've heard that Moore was preparing copies to send to Clercellier. Could Clark have had sight of those and copied those? But this seems to be ruled out by the date, because Moore's letter to Clercellier saying he's going to send these letters is 1655, and this notebook is 1654. So this seems to strengthen the hypothesis that these are copies made from letters which were being in circulation. But then we have the question of why not letter 4? Why is it not there? Why is that not there? As far as letters, Cartesian manuscripts in circulation are concerned, it's well known they did do this, and there are several in Cambridge University Library. Here are some of them. Some of them are actually epitomes that have been made and then get copied for study purposes. And I've reproduced one on the right, which is from John Collett. It's a mathematical one, Equatio Cartesiana, which is also among the Newtonian papers, but one can see that there are mathematical reasons why this might be. So there is clearly a tradition of circulating manuscripts, of students copying manuscripts, and so this lends support to the idea that the Clark notebook is such a manuscript. that it's likely that Thomas Clarke was studying Descartes' philosophy, and he may have copied More's letters from a copy in circulation among undergraduate students. However, there is no other known case of such you would expect that perhaps have been other such manuscripts would have come to light or survived, but we don't know of any. Nevertheless, there is good evidence that Cartesianism was being taught at Clarke's college. And this is in the form of another man called Clarke, but Clarke is spelt differently, not C-L-A-R-K-E, but C-L-E-R-K-E. It is Gilbert Clarke. Gilbert Clarke was a fellow, that is one of the teachers at Sydney Sussex College. Like Moore, he was an admirer of Descartes, and he also claimed credit for introducing the teaching of Cartesianism in Cambridge. I think that's probably he meant introducing it into his college. He also claimed he introduced the teaching of mathematics into Cambridge. Well, that too has to be qualified, but nevertheless, he was clearly a mathematician. And later on, in 1660, he published a number of pieces, Cartesian pieces, one on the question of the plenum, de plenitudine mundi, in which he defended the Cartesian theory of rarefaction. Another on about the experimentum Torricelliano, is that how you say it? The Torricelliano. This experiment, he gave a Cartesian explanation of that. So he clearly was very strongly committed to Descartes. Unfortunately, we don't have a list of his students, so we don't know if Clarke was one of them. But he would you wouldn't have to register as a student of someone. Even most students were listed under a particular teacher. But let us suppose your teacher didn't know mathematics and you wanted to study mathematics. You could study with another person. So it could be that Clarke studied with the other Clarke. As far as Clarke and Gilbert Clarke and Henry Moore are concerned, we don't know if they had any contact. But given that they were both admirers of Descartes before Cartesianism was fully accepted, I would think it very unlikely that they did know of one another. And they certainly had one of their acquaintances in common was a Cambridge mathematician called Uchtred. So it's more than likely that they knew one another, especially as Moore had been in correspondence with Descartes. That would have been pretty famous. It is therefore not impossible that Moore would have allowed Clarke to have copies made of the correspondence. This is a hypothesis. One might even go further. Perhaps Moore had asked Clarke, because he knew a bit, he was sufficiently knowledgeable of Cartesianism. Maybe he asked Clarke to copy the letters for him for Clercellier. Anyone? This is speculation. Let's pull ourselves back a bit. I've looked at other correspondences for this period, the Conway letters, for example, the Worthington correspondence, which is extremely important for the history of intellectual history in England. But the Hartlib correspondence, they don't make any revelations here. But let's now go on to think about the chronology of all this. So, Clercellier writes to Moore in 1654. Moore receives that letter in 1655, April 1655, okay? When he was out of Cambridge in his hometown, he'd come back, and the letter was waiting for him at Christ College. He wrote almost straight away to Clercellier on the 14th of May, but before that he wrote to Hartlib to ask for the copies of the original copies, the autographed manuscripts of Descartes' letters, which were he'd lent to Hartlib. And then he replies to Clercellier saying he's having them copied and he will send them. And then in May of that year, he thanks Hartlib for sending the Descartes letters. So he says, "Thank you, but I'm sorry I'm so late saying thank you." So this means that Descartes' letters, the originals, were not in Cambridge when Clercellier's letter arrived, not in Cambridge in 1654. So if Clarke did his manuscript copy in 1654, he could not have copied the originals of Descartes' letters, but he could have copied more, of course. So anyway, the dates appear to exclude Clarke's notebook. But as I said earlier, just because the notebook is 1654, first thing, doesn't mean that the letters were absolutely made in that. The copy was made then. And another important piece of evidence is that if you look closely below that, scored through, there is also another date, 2 years later, 1656. So maybe this is a notebook which runs from 1654 to 1656. So it's sort of what's certification. Yeah, maybe that's one possibility. But there is another thing which we mustn't forget. The calendar. The calendar in England didn't change when the Gregorian calendar was introduced everywhere else in Europe. And England kept the Julian calendar, and very often dates, and another thing is that the date of the New Year was the legal New Year, the year for legal and financial matters was actually the 5th in April. So the months January, February, March are actually from the previous year under that calendar. So a date of 1654 could run up to as late as at the end of March, April. This brings us back to the possibility that these copies were made at around the time when More was having the correspondence copied for Clercellier. So, and in fact, if you look at documents of the period, they often have two dates, Old Style and New Style, so that's yet another factor. One more thing, though we come back to this question, there are only 3 of More's letters there. So this would suggest that More was preparing to send 3 letters of his and 2 of Descartes. Of course, it doesn't exclude the fact that only 3 had been in circulation, but it does fit with the possibility that these were made at the time when More was preparing to send materials to Clercellier. And another point in favour of that are these modifications which you find in the printed version, but you don't find in the Hartlib version. Unfortunately, we don't have enough manuscripts for comparison, but I think and something that I'm certainly doing now is to look more closely to see if I can find more cases where the printed version and this manuscript have more in common than with the Hartley version, maybe the version that Descartes actually received. So my concluding hypothesis is, and this is very provisional because there's lots more work to do, is that the Clarke copy was made around the time when More was preparing his correspondence with Descartes to send to Clercellier. It was probably, that copy was made by someone that More knew, obviously, but the Clarke copy must have been made by someone who knew the transcriber. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility that the transcriber may have been Clarke himself, but here we have to, here there is work to do on the corrections of this manuscript and who made those. Not that this is a fair copy that's being made, but he's working off a copy where there were points that he couldn't read. So anyway, there's certainly more to find out there. So, as I said, this is a preliminary suggestion. It's very speculative, entirely provisional. If it is correct, we still have the question of how we get from Clarke's notebook to Newton's papers, but that of course is another story. Thank you very much.
Sala, very, very interesting and very important. Mi sembra che siamo stati messi al corrente di cose molto importanti e le questioni sarebbero molte anche se si tratta di un argomento molto tecnico e non semplicissimo. Anche per me, che ho studiato questa corrispondenza, non sono chiare molte cose, quindi magari ti farò delle domande di chiarimento piuttosto, ma apro intanto il dibattito.
Volevo anche dire che se voi avete suggestioni mi fa sapere.
Certo. Non solo in questa sede intende la professoressa, quindi possiamo ragionarci anche nei prossimi giorni. Piano magari.
Sì, mi occupo di Clercellier e ho cercato di ricostruire anch'io a mio modo un po' tutta la corrispondenza che ha avuto negli anni, no? In particolare quella sull'Eucaristia, però ovviamente ho cercato di fare un percorso completo per vedere un po' quello che aveva fatto durante la sua vita. E quindi in qualche modo ho incrociato a un certo punto anche la corrispondenza con More. E non ho niente da dire in più rispetto a quello che ha detto lei, evidentemente. Per questo la ringrazio, anzi per averci portato degli elementi nuovi. Io semmai volevo fare una precisazione, ma per gli studenti, in modo che possano ritrovare poi le lettere anche nelle varie edizioni, perché questa che lei indica come 12 novembre 1649, noi non la ritroveremo mai così perché 12 calende di novembre, quindi sarebbe 21 ottobre del 1649. Cioè la datazione è 12 ottobre 1649, perché sarebbe 12 calende novembre. Poi non cambia nulla,
Questo qui.
Sì, l'ultima, che poi
Sì,
è
sì.
la lettera che crea più problemi, no? Questa è l'unica precisazione che volevo fare. E volevo chiedere, perché forse mi è sfuggito un passaggio, questa ultima, lei ha detto che non è presente nel manoscritto,
No,
giusto?
non si trova lì, no. Ma è stato inviato a Cartesio per noi e fu lì fra le lettere che aveva among the letters of Descartes, Clecelier would find this one too. Yeah. He knew.
Lui, allora, Clecelier la chiede a Mo, perché questa non ce l'ha, giusto?
No.
No. È autografo.
Clecelier ha chiesto la permissione di pubblicarle.
Sì.
E Mo ha detto, aspetta un momento, voglio fare correzioni. Gli mando le lettere ricopiate con queste correzioni. E sono questi che sono stati pubblicati da Clecelier e da Mo.
Però, come ho ricostruito io, ma magari mi sbaglio, allora lui scrive, Clecelier scrive a Moore a dicembre, l'11 dicembre del
48.
Del 48. E dice che sta per...
Clecelier.
Clecelier.
No, Clecelier scrive nel 55.
Scusate,
45.
scusate,
nel 55.
54.
54, ok.
12 dicembre, sbagliato, scusate, 12 dicembre del 54. Gli scrive, dice sto preparando l'edizione,
Sì.
che ho le lettere perché me le ha date Chanou. Ti chiedo di autorizzarmi a pubblicarle.
Sì.
E gli dice quali lettere ha. E dice vorrei anche però le copie di tutte le lettere che Descartes ti ha mandato. Non voglio solo le tue risposte, ma voglio anche le lettere che
aveva l'idea che c'erano altri, che forse...
Che lui non aveva.
Sì, forse Cartesio ha inviato altre lettere, o uno o... non so. No.
Ecco, se io non ho capito male, lui non aveva però, gli mancava, io non sono segnato perché ho controllato, non aveva la risposta di Mora Descartes del 23 luglio 49 né quella del 21 ottobre del 49, cioè questa che abbiamo indicato come 12 novembre, non ce l'aveva.
No.
Non aveva la responsio.
Esatto, non ce l'aveva questa.
Ma aveva questo frammento.
Sì, che dicevo, tu las
Sì.
paginas,
Sì.
giusto?
Sì.
Okay.
E credo che pensava che dal fatto che c'erano questi quarti d'amore, che deve essere un altro, quell'ultimo è il risposto a un'altra lettera che non aveva.
Ora, la mia domanda, perché può darsi che poi io abbia perso nella sua esposizione, questa lettera appunto che non è nel manoscritto, lei si è fatta un'idea del perché potrebbe non essere presente?
Perché ho capito bene perché non
This letter, this last
La
letter,
quarta.
sì. Letter is not in this manuscript. You have
no, e non si trova lì, no.
Yes, but does we have some elements that tell us why?
Solo questo commento d'amore a Clecelier, che secondo lui non bisogna pubblicare questo per causa del fatto che non c'è risposta da Cartesio. Ma ha detto una frase come I leave it to your judgment. Lei pote decidere, sì. Lei può decidere, sì. E questo club non contiene questo frammento mandato per Clecelier, il frammento del risposto alla lettera di luglio non contiene quello, neanche quello.
Posso dire una cosa? Mi pare, se ricordo bene, che, e questo è un punto fondamentale, cosa Clecelier non trova? Clecelier non trova la risposta di Mo e la risposta di Cartesio a quelle che lui dice essere la terza e la quarta lettera. Clercellet è convinto che la risposta di Moore sia la risposta alla terza e alla quarta lettera.
Sì.
Clercellet è convinto di questo. Moore sa che è sbagliato. Moore sa che, questo l'ha dimostrato Alan Gabay, che la risposta, la terza lettera di Cartesio, il frammento, no? Risponde solo alla terza. Quella del 23 luglio. Non era possibile che il frammento rispondesse anche, non il frammento, l'ultima risposta di Cartesio, che poi il frammento sì, che rispondesse anche alla quarta. Quindi Clercellet si sbagliava su questo. Clercellet was wrong in assuming that Descartes
sì, infatti, ma anche Clercellet, perché Clercellet c'è la possibilità di altre spiegazioni.
Altro materiale. Ma mi chiedo, questo può avere a che fare col fatto che questo manoscritto contenga solo le prime 3 lettere? Non mi pare però, perché qui non abbiamo la terza lettera di Cartesio.
Non esiste. La terza lettera di Cartesio non esiste.
La lettera certo, la terza, c'è una terza lettera di Cartesio, che è quella che ha Moore e che Clercellet gli chiede. Il frammento, certo,
secondo Clercellet, ma infatti non c'è un terzo da Cartesio a Moore.
Sì.
C'è quello frammento.
Il frammento, il frammento.
Solo
certo,
certo.
Nel manoscritto di Clarke non c'è il frammento. Non c'è il frammento. No.
Neanche al frammento né
la mia ipotesi poteva essere, allora, siccome Moore, a differenza di quello che pensa Clercellet, sa che il frammento risponde solo alla terza lettera, allora l'assenza della quarta lettera si spiegherebbe col fatto che la quarta è realmente unanswered, però manca anche il frammento. Manca anche il frammento in questo manoscritto.
Sì.
Quindi anche la terza è una lettera non risposta, non solo la quarta.
Sì.
Quindi l'argomento per cui manca la quarta, perché la quarta non ha risposta, non regge tantissimo, mi sembra. Perché neanche la terza è una lettera che contiene risposta.
Ma se Mo ha lasciato girare queste lettere fra gli studenti, prima della lettera di Clercellet non ha saputo niente di questa lettera, questo frammento?
No, sì.
Prima
No, Moore non sapeva niente della risposta al frammento, ma del frammento ce l'aveva Moore perché gli aveva spedito Cartesio. E Clercellet quello chiede.
No, credo, no, è Clercellet che l'ha inviato a Moore.
Sì, hai ragione, sì.
Prima non ha saputo niente. Non ha
saputo
saputo niente dal frammento.
Sì, pardon.
Ci resta la possibilità che tutto il tempo Mo pensava che non bisogna, nonostante il fatto che ha scritto un 4 lettera, pensava di non fare girarlo perché prima il contatto con Clercellet, se l'ha fatto, ma non sappiamo se l'ha fatto, per questa causa. Perché
Sì. No, scusi, mi ho confuso, è chiarissimo, sì.
It's confusing.
Ho confuso io. L'altra cosa che volevo chiederti è se hai paragonato questo manoscritto anche con l'edizione degli Opera Omnia.
Non ancora.
Perché ad esempio io credo che in Opera Omnia, qui abbiamo, adesso non ho visto, però extensionem, la prima occorrenza di infinita, in Opera Omnia penso che sia indefinita già. Sono quasi sicuro.
Allora è possibile, ci resta la possibilità che i copisti conoscevano il testo stampato da Cartesio. È interessante. grazie.
No, figurati.
Devo controllare.
Sì. La collection quando è stata edita? Perché
sì.
la collection è stata edita prima dell'opera omnia. E nella collection nel 60, siamo all'inizio degli anni 60.
1662.
62, la collection del 62. E lì è la prima edizione, se non sbaglio, inglese.
Inglese, sì.
Sì.
Prima c'è l'edizione delle lettere diverse del primo tomo.
Poi è il testo della collection, che secondo me è fondamentale.
Poi c'è quella dove c'è Shelby che cita il passo.
Sì.
Però diciamo
Perché io ho detto opera omnia, ma volevo dire anzitutto il testo della collection, perché poi l'opera omnia riprende il testo della collection, gli opera omnia. Sì.
Ok. Sarebbe interessante sapere se nel carteggio clesseliano privato ci sono osservazioni su Mo per Clesselie a altri...
no.
No, abbiamo cercato, non ci sono.
Non ci sono. L'unica cosa che si potrebbe guardare forse, però non lo so in quegli anni, se negli anni 50 certo si deve vedere, perché io ho guardato corrispondenza successiva agli 60, forse Oldenburg si potrebbe controllare se c'è qualche cosa proprio. Non ho mai visto. Se c'è qualche riferimento in quegli anni.
Prego.
Una curiosità, cioè Moore faceva circolare questo libro del suo cartello, quindi aveva fatto circolare
non è sicuro che l'ha fatto, ma c'è evidenza che c'è stato, sì. Ma è possibile che è una circolazione cosiddetta pirata, ma
Quest'altra cosa che volevo dire, quando Moore spedisce la lettera a Clesselier, gli dice, no? Gli dice, attenzione, ci sono delle modifiche che ho fatto. Sono forse le modifiche di cui parlavi prima, anche in cui abbassa i toni elogiativi all'inizio, no?
Sì. Sull'autorità di Gabi, su queste lettere, la prima lettera, queste modificazioni si trovano nel testo stampato.
Sì. Sembra quasi un suggerimento, infatti, quello che Moore gli dice, no? Guarda, te le invio, ho fatto qualche piccolo ritocco rispetto a quelle che avevo scritto. Sembra quasi che gli chieda di metterle così ritoccate.
Quasi di...
It seems that he asked to him gently, it would be better if you publish this last version with my modifications.
Sì. È possibile che ha detto non vi mando le lettere in questo momento, nonostante il fatto che sono già copiate, ho fatto copie.
Sì, ricopiate.
Le mando quando ricevo confermazione che ha ricevuto questa lettera che scrivo adesso.
Sì.
Secondo Gabi, Mo faceva un dopo gioco fino a fare per incoraggiare Clesselie da mandargli a quello frammento e altre cose a quale Clesselie ha fatto menzione.
Sì. E questo sarebbe anche confermato dal fatto che nell'epistola VC Moore è molto attento, no, alla corrispondenza, perché la corrispondenza, tutte le lettere della corrispondenza gli servono per costruire un'immagine più grande di Cartesio, che lui non aveva sulla base dei soli testi a stampa, no? Aveva un'immagine di Cartesio troppo stretta, sapeva lui che nella corrispondenza ci poteva essere cose molto importanti, specialmente per per l'idea, per il rapporto di Cartesio con la religione. Sì. Questo era decisivo per lui.
Sì, è vero, sì, è vero, sì, d'accordo.
Sì, prego. Sì. Vabbè, poi andiamo alla parola.
Ad entrare.
Sì.
L'edizione d'Antanelli, su cosa si basa l'edizione d'Antanelli per il carteggio, Moore, Descartes, quali documenti, quali testimoni ha?
L'edizione Clesselier?
No, ad Antanelli.
Tu poi...
Sì, l'edizione d'Antanelli si basa su Clesselier, però poi ci sono anche delle note di comparazione. Nella nouvelle présentation Alain Gabay fa la collazione sistematica fra tutte le edizioni ed è eccezionale, cioè lì abbiamo tutto, tranne questi manoscritti.
Quindi noi
abbiamo l'edizione, grazie a Gabay, e la collazione in appendice. Sì, quella è un lavoro eccezionale, Prego, Mattia.
Yeah, of course. Sorry.
In the class
Yes.
that we have here, there is still a problem since there is still one letter of more to take up without an answer, right?
Yes.
So this is the problem. And this, I think, the question was, if this is the case, though, the argument that the fourth letter is not included here because there is no reply from Descartes seems to be
weakened.
Because in a way, there is, even here, even in this format, there is one letter without reply. And so at that point, the argument, well, I'm not having the fourth letter because the part never replied, well, it's not strong, because indeed, in a way, it's unfair, even in the present form. So this is, I think, the question when it was raised, and I think...
One possible objection is
so
not definitive, yes.
And then a second point, just a small thing. In the slide with the passage with the box, there is chair.
Which one?
There is a passage where it's speaking about the box. So there is chair.
Quello lì.
Yeah, here. And it's underlined the word here. And in one slide before, if I'm not mistaken, there was one other word which was underlined and later on replaced. And so my question is whether the scribe would underline the words, which is suggesting that it was not clear about the translation. Because you say that this one in heart maybe is left blank. So it must be said that the manuscript is taken from the word in heart to read. And so even Chere was very difficult and the scribe was unsure. And if you go, I don't remember which slides, but there was one slide with the slide with the corrections. There were a lot of corrections.
That one?
Here. And if you see the common gloss, it's once again underlined.
Yes.
And so my question is whether the scribe was underlining the words he wasn't sure to be able to read. Not so much to say they're important, but to say I'm not sure about them. And in the case of common gloss, then was able to kind of guess it right.
The interesting thing about this underlining is it's not in ink. It's not in
pencil.
So this suggests the curious thing is he could just leave a blank. If he couldn't read this, he could just leave a gap. But maybe it was to indicate, unless it was to indicate more clearly to compare with the other copy. I don't know. But it is a coincidence there that there is this there is a correspondence between the underlining and the blank.
I would like to maybe try
just
It's just the difficulty in reading the manuscript.
a...
So that Cere at the very beginning was very difficult to get.
Yeah, yes, I think so. Yes, I think so. And and this occurs in the letter from Descartes. So it's possible that the Hartlib scribe too couldn't read that. That the common copy for both of them, the word. It's not that this was copied from the Hartlib, because it was obviously not, but that the Cartesian manuscript was difficult there. Yes. I mean that's an interesting lead. All these points need to be checked through. Yes. But on the point about the weakness of the argument about the fourth letter, I think it is important in this sense. If more authorized, if more genuinely believed, he should not make public a letter for which there is no reply. This would suggest he would not, if he authorized a circulation, an informal circulation in manuscript in Cambridge, he would have withheld that letter. So that the clerk could have been made from an authorized copy circulating, speculative. Yeah. But I think it's more probable, when More said that, it's his game. It's an attempt to encourage Clercellier to send him the fragment, because he genuinely wants to see what Descartes said. He genuinely wanted to see, because his letters are full of, please explain to me this, I don't understand that. And he really was hoping that Descartes would help him understand his philosophy better. In fact, More wrote a response to that, and when he realized that the answer was not going to be what he hoped for.
Ci sono altre domande?
Non il Hartlib stesso, ma un scribe, come si dice scribe?
Scriba.
Scriba di.
Sì.
Hartlib aveva due scribe
Scriba.
per queste lettere.
Quanto è attendibile il testo?
How faithful, fedele. L'uno ha fatto un grandissimo sbaglio. A whole piece of text is in the wrong place. But then the second one, this is corrected. So I don't know.
Dove?
Quambis è un quambis con contrazione, no?
Come no? Sarebbe sopra?
Dopo lo spazio bianco, guarda l'altra scrizione.
Qui sotto?
Qui lo vedo, sopra dove sta?
Qua è quambis.
Quale riga?
L'ultimo rigo.
Terzultima?
Quello non è.
Qua?
Qua è quambis senza M.
Strano.
Senza M con un... No? No?
Strano infatti.
Non pensi?
Qui Clercellier ha Quambis però. Clercellier e Leopra Omnia lì hanno Quambis, lo ricordo bene.
Ma ci sono sbagli.
Anche la Q è un po' diversa, se vedete le Q in generale la Q viene fatta sempre in un altro modo. Quella non è
No, quello è un punto molto importante. importante, perché l'argomento è fondamentale quello è l'argomento fondamentale sull'articolo dei principi, sull'identità fra materia ed estensione, è decisivo. L'unica cosa è che lì per forza ci deve essere una concessiva in quel punto, no? Dice, per quanto possa non avere questa o quella forma, deve comunque averne una, quindi è comunque inseparabile, no? Ma lì però non riesco a capire quale concessiva può essere se non è quambis, perché le concessive che iniziano con Q.
Ma non è, guarda, potrebbe essere stata scritta male, però non è neanche una Q, perché la Q non è così. Guarda tutti gli esempi di Q che ci sono. Sembra G.
Sembra G, ma allora che cos'è? Che cos'è?
No, a me una Q sembra però, perché è uguale al qua di perché è accanto. Qua. No, è qua, sono identiche le Q.
No, guarda tutte le Q, guarda.
È scritta lì la qua è uguale.
Ma bisogna vedere più di quelle due, e qualche volta le lettere...
No, allora, queste due, questa e questa sono identiche. Ma come no? C'è una piccola differenza, però non è significativa. Ma non è qua, non riesco a capire che cos'è, perché lì la frase vuole una concessiva. Non riesco a capire che cos'è. Come?
Sì. Vediamo un altro.
Quando?
Un'altra pagina.
Non c'è più.
No, non è neanche quando. Vabbè.
E qui non ha la coda? Ci sono varianti.
Sì, varianti, non è sempre uguale, però quella è una cosa. Però che cosa è?
È un studio per fare
risolvere qui questa questione.
cross-eyed, come si dice? Cross gli occhi.
Ah, sì. Ci sono altre domande?
O suggestione o rivelazione.
Bene, noi diamo la nostra, innanzitutto ringraziamo la professoressa Hutton, diamo la nostra disponibilità a dare tutte le nostre suggestioni e il nostro aiuto se necessario a questa importantissima ricerca. E niente, grazie Sara.